What I'm about to tell you got people executed. Not figuratively, not as a metaphor. For 400 years, possessing the seeds of this plant meant death. Colonial soldiers burned entire fields while families watched helplessly. They cut off hands. They made brutal public examples of anyone who dared to grow it. And for centuries, nobody in the modern world understood why anyone would go to such extremes. Then scientists in the 1970s ran laboratory tests on this grain for the first time in modern history. They analyzed its protein structure. They measured its amino acid content molecule by molecule. They isolated a compound hiding in its seeds. And when they saw the results come back from the laboratory, they ran every single test again, because they assumed their equipment had catastrophically malfunctioned. It hadn't malfunctioned. The results were completely real. This single plant contains something the pharmaceutical industry has spent billions of dollars trying to create in laboratories around the world. It produces more of a critical amino acid than any grain ever tested in scientific history. It grows and thrives in harsh conditions that would kill every single crop currently sitting in your grocery store within weeks. But here's what kept me up at night when I first discovered this story. The grain didn't go extinct. Somehow, impossibly, against all odds, it survived 4 centuries of systematic destruction. And the story of how it survived, who saved it, what they risked, and what it means for you right now in this exact moment, is something I absolutely have to tell you. The Aztecs called it huautli. Today, we call it amaranth. And to understand why someone would execute farmers over seeds, you need to see exactly what the Spanish conquistadors saw when they walked into the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan on November 8, 1519. They found a city larger and more sophisticated than any in Europe at that time. They found towering pyramids and floating gardens and engineering that rivaled ancient Rome at its absolute peak. But what stopped them cold wasn't the architecture or the gold or the military power. It was what the Aztecs were eating. They weren't just consuming this grain as ordinary food. They were shaping it into statues of their gods, mixing it with honey in sacred rituals, eating it in religious ceremonies that had continued unbroken for 8,000 years before Europeans knew this continent existed. 8,000 years. Let that sink in for a moment. That's older than the Egyptian pyramids, older than Stonehenge, older than the first written word scratched into clay tablets. The Spanish looked at amaranth and saw dangerous heresy that threatened their entire mission. But here's what they actually saw, even if they didn't have the scientific vocabulary to name it properly. They saw a civilization that couldn't be starved into submission. Amaranth grew where absolutely nothing else would grow. It survived droughts that completely destroyed corn harvests across entire regions. A single plant produced up to 60,000 seeds. The Aztec Empire collected it as taxes because pound for pound it was more valuable than gold itself. The Spanish understood something that most people still don't grasp even today. You cannot control a population that feeds itself. So they issued a decree that changed history forever. Every amaranth field burned to the ground immediately. Every farmer caught growing it punished by death or dismemberment. Every seed destroyed wherever found. For 400 years, the most nutritious grain on earth became a crime punishable by execution. And their plan almost worked. Almost. Because in remote mountain villages scattered across Mexico and Guatemala and the Andes, indigenous farmers did something that would change the course of history. They hid seeds in secret places. They grew tiny secret plots in valleys where soldiers couldn't reach. They passed the knowledge to their children in whispers, generation after generation after generation. They chose prison and death over letting this grain disappear from the earth. For 4 centuries of brutal persecution, they kept amaranth alive against impossible odds. And when scientists finally analyzed what those farmers had protected with their lives, the results changed everything we thought we knew about plant nutrition. The protein content alone was absolutely staggering. Amaranth contains up to 19% protein by weight. That's dramatically higher than wheat, rice, corn, or any other grain you've ever eaten in your life. But protein content is just a number on paper. What actually matters is what that protein is made of at the molecular level. Your body builds and repairs itself from amino acids, 20 different ones total. Your liver can manufacture 11 of them on its own without any outside help. But 9 of them, called the essential amino acids, have to come directly from food. Miss even one of them, and your body can't build muscle properly, can't repair damaged tissue efficiently, can't function the way it should. Here's the problem that nutritionists struggled with for decades. Wheat is missing adequate lysine. Corn is missing sufficient tryptophan. Rice is missing enough methionine. Every single grain has a gap somewhere. That's exactly why nutritionists spent decades telling people to carefully combine foods. Beans with rice, hummus with pita bread, specifically to fill those nutritional gaps. Amaranth has no gaps whatsoever. Every essential amino acid present. Perfect ratios for human nutrition. A 2023 peer-reviewed study confirmed that amaranth protein matches World Health Organization standards for what humans actually need. The biological value, measuring how much protein your body actually absorbs and uses, scores 75 out of 100, higher than any other grain ever tested in scientific literature. But the protein isn't what made pharmaceutical executives lose sleep at night. Squalene did. Squalene is traditionally harvested from shark livers. It takes thousands of dead sharks to produce commercial quantities. The pharmaceutical industry uses it in vaccines, experimental cancer treatments, luxury cosmetics, and advanced skin therapies. The global market generates hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue annually. Companies have spent billions trying to synthesize it efficiently in labs. They've consistently failed to match what nature produces effortlessly. In 2003, researchers He and Cork published a groundbreaking study that should have made headlines worldwide. They tested over 100 different amaranth varieties from around the globe. They found that amaranth oil contains up to 7.3% squalene by weight. That's the highest concentration ever documented in any plant on Earth. Higher than olive oil, higher than wheat germ, higher than any botanical source known to modern science. Amaranth produces pharmaceutical-grade squalene naturally and effortlessly. In its seeds. No sharks killed, no billion-dollar laboratories required, just a plant that grows almost anywhere with almost nothing. Now you're beginning to understand why someone would burn entire fields over this grain. But I haven't told you the part that matters most right now. The part that explains why amaranth terrifies modern industrial agriculture even more than it terrified Spanish conquistadors 5 centuries ago. Amaranth uses an advanced biological system called C4 photosynthesis. Most crops you eat, wheat, rice, soybeans, vegetables, use an older, less efficient system called C3. They need consistent rainfall, decent soil, and moderate temperatures to produce yields. When conditions turn harsh, they wilt, they fail, they die. Amaranth doesn't play by those rules. C4 plants concentrate carbon dioxide differently at the cellular level. They keep photosynthesizing and producing food when other plants completely shut down. They thrive in scorching heat that kills wheat. They produce abundant food in droughts that destroy corn harvests entirely.
I get to
Grain
walk on
amaranth
through
grows successfully
and
in
see these
areas
sort of
receiving
beautiful
just 8 inches
hanging
of rainfall
guys
per year.
just chilling out here. It's just
Corn typically needs 25 inches minimum. A 2024 study published in Discover Agriculture documented amaranth yields reaching 7,200 kilograms per hectare, fully competitive with heavily subsidized commodity crops, while using a fraction of the water and almost zero fertilizer. It tolerates salt levels in soil that would kill conventional crops outright. It tolerates ground so poor that other plants won't even germinate. It tolerates temperature extremes that would devastate any modern industrial farm operation. And here's the part that no agricultural corporation on Earth can solve, no matter how much money they throw at it. You cannot patent a plant that humans have cultivated for 8,000 years. Amaranth exists permanently in the public domain, forever. Any farmer anywhere on Earth can grow it, save the seeds, replant next season, and never pay a single licensing fee to anyone. No corporate contracts, no seed restrictions, no dependency whatsoever on any company. You cannot sell expensive agricultural inputs to farmers who don't need them. Amaranth barely needs irrigation. It barely needs fertilizer. It grows productively in conditions where expensive agricultural chemicals provide zero measurable benefit. You simply cannot build a profit model around a crop that makes farmers completely independent. Climate scientists are now projecting that by 2050, 25% of current farmland becomes unsuitable for conventional agriculture. The crops feeding humanity today were bred for stable climate conditions that no longer exist and are disappearing faster every single year. Amaranth evolved for exactly the chaos that's coming. The same Discover Agriculture study that measured its yields specifically called it a climate-smart crop, suited for what scientists term progressive seasonal unreliability. Translation: when the weather becomes increasingly unpredictable and extreme, amaranth keeps producing food while other crops fail catastrophically. And amaranth produces more than just grain. The leaves are completely edible and highly nutritious. Research from the University of Florida documented vegetable amaranth yields exceeding 20,000 pounds of leafy greens per acre, more iron than spinach, more calcium, more vitamin C. Across Asia and Africa, hundreds of millions of people eat amaranth greens as an essential daily staple food. One single plant, complete protein, valuable pharmaceutical compounds, extreme drought resistance, nutritious edible leaves, and absolutely no corporate ownership possible. This is exactly why they burned the fields 500 years ago. This is exactly why farmers faced execution for possessing seeds. This is exactly why you've probably never heard of amaranth until right now. But the seeds those indigenous farmers hid in remote mountain valleys 400 years ago, the sacred knowledge they passed down through generations of violent persecution, that heritage is still here today. In Mexico City, you can buy alegrias on any street corner. Puffed amaranth bound with honey and sugar. The exact same recipe that survived the conquest intact. Walk through any Mexican market, and you'll find them sold the same way they were sold before Columbus was born. In India, they call it Rajgira, meaning the royal grain. During religious fasting periods, when other foods are strictly forbidden, amaranth sustains the body because nothing else provides complete nutrition from a single plant source. American researchers at Purdue University, Iowa State, and the Rodale Institute have studied amaranth cultivation intensively since the 1970s. Small independent farms are growing it. Health food stores are stocking it on their shelves. The word is spreading faster than ever before. And here's something that should tell you everything about what this grain truly represents. NASA is actively researching amaranth for future Mars missions. Complete protein in minimal space. Maximum nutrition per pound of cargo weight. Grows in controlled environments with minimal resources. When humans eventually establish colonies on another planet, they might survive on the same grain that Spanish conquistadors tried to permanently erase from Earth. The Aztecs called amaranth the food of the gods. They cultivated it for 8,000 years. They built one of history's greatest empires on its nutritional foundation. Hernán Cortés understood its power. That's precisely why he tried so desperately to destroy it. Those indigenous farmers who risked death to save seeds in hidden mountain valleys, they understood something too. They knew that 400 years of persecution couldn't last forever. They knew that someday their descendants would need this grain desperately. They were right. The seeds survived. The knowledge survived. And now you know the truth. What other foods have been hidden from you? What else grows in your backyard that you've been told is worthless? Drop it in the comments below. Let's find out together what else has been buried. Because amaranth is just the beginning. What I'm revealing next week makes this look like nothing. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. Share this with someone who deserves to hear it. The most dangerous plants aren't the ones that harm you. They're the ones that set you free. See you in the next one.